Princess Leora of Valoria was famous across the galaxy, though she had never wanted to be. Her people whispered about her beauty, her intelligence, and her unmatched skill in both diplomacy and strategy. Yet what everyone remembered most was her reputation for rejecting every male who came to her court, regardless of rank, wealth, or power. Warriors, nobles, kings, and even galactic princes had traveled light years to seek her favor, only to leave humiliated and frustrated. None could understand why she was so impossible to please. Leora herself did not care about appearances or flattery. She had been betrayed once in her earliest days as princess, by those she thought she could trust. An alliance with another species had promised protection for her people, but ended in disaster. That day had left scars, not visible to the eye but deep in her heart. From then on, she swore never to trust any male who approached her for selfish reasons. She ruled Valoria with wisdom and strength, yet her solitude weighed heavily on her, though she would never admit it to anyone. Across the stars, humans were curious about Valoria. It was a world of beauty and danger, with cities that floated above crystal oceans and mountains that shimmered like glass. Diplomacy with the Valorians had always been tricky, as their princess refused every proposal for alliance that included giving her hand in partnership. Yet Earth had no choice. A fragile treaty required human presence, and someone had to go to Valoria to demonstrate goodwill. The person chosen was Ethan, a calm and clever engineer with no interest in grandeur or rank, but a mind that could solve problems even the Valorians found impossible. Ethan's journey to Valoria had been long and quiet. Unlike other humans who might have tried to impress with stories of Earth's power or wealth, he simply observed, learned, and prepared. His demeanor was unassuming, and yet he carried an air of calm confidence that made others notice him, though not always immediately. He arrived in the palace without ceremony, not seeking attention, but focused on understanding the palace systems, the technology that powered Valoria, and the delicate mechanisms that even the best engineers in the galaxy struggled with. From the very first meeting, Princess Leora studied him carefully. Unlike the others, he did not bow excessively or brag about human achievements. He did not try to charm her or argue that humans were superior. He simply existed, quiet, capable, and strangely fearless. That alone puzzled her. She had never encountered a male who approached her world with such humility and focus. She was wary, as always, but there was a spark of curiosity she had not felt in years. Days passed, and the Valorian males continued to vie for her attention, each trying their own approach. One boasted about victories in combat, another flaunted treasures from distant worlds, and yet another demonstrated alien technologies that made the palace tremble with excitement. Leora, as always, turned them down with polite but firm refusal. The male arrogance, their lack of understanding of her people's needs, only confirmed her decision. And then there was Ethan, who quietly fixed a broken energy panel in the palace without seeking praise. It was during one routine inspection of the palace's energy core that disaster struck. The main energy chamber, which powered much of the floating city above the ocean, began to fluctuate violently. Alarms blared across the palace and the lights flickered like a dying star. Every Valorian warrior ran toward the scene, trying to understand what had gone wrong. Leora, calm but alert, followed them, her eyes scanning the console panels for information. Ethan had already assessed the problem. The energy core was dangerously unstable. If not corrected immediately, the entire upper city could collapse into the ocean below, along with thousands of lives. The other males panicked, arguing over who should take charge, while Leora stood frozen for a moment, unsure how to act. Then she saw Ethan moving toward the chamber, tools in hand, his expression calm but determined. "Stop him," she shouted. It was not a command to show authority, but a desperate plea born from fear she had not expected to feel. Ethan looked up and met her eyes. "This can't wait. People's lives are at risk," he said simply. There was no arrogance in his voice, no bravado, only a quiet insistence on doing what was right. Leora's heart pounded as she realized that for the first time, someone did not seem afraid of her or the danger. She could feel herself trembling, though she would never let it show. She had spent her life controlling situations, yet here was a human who moved without hesitation, and in that moment she felt a strange emotion, respect mingled with fear. The core chamber's energy readings climbed dangerously high. Sparks flew from the consoles and smoke filled the air. Ethan dove into the chaos, carefully adjusting conduits, rerouting power flows, and improvising with tools he had brought with him. Every Valorian warrior who tried to follow him hesitated, unsure if they could trust him to survive such a feat. Leora, for the first time in her life, felt powerless. She could not order him to stop, nor could she manage the disaster herself. Minutes felt like hours. The alarm blared and the palace shook. Leora shouted instructions to the medics and engineers nearby, but her voice was laced with fear. Ethan, working tirelessly, stabilized one conduit then another, sweat running down his brow. The heat and the unstable energy made the task nearly impossible. But he did not falter. His mind worked calmly, analyzing, adapting, and correcting errors in real time. Finally, with a decisive adjustment, the energy core stabilized. Lights returned to normal and the alarms ceased. The city above the ocean was safe once more. Ethan collapsed to his knees, exhausted but smiling faintly. Leora rushed to him, kneeling beside him despite the ceremonial distance she normally kept. "You risked everything for us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words surprised her as much as they surprised him. She had never spoken to anyone like this, not even to her closest advisors. Ethan looked up at her, still catching his breath. "Because lives matter more than pride or fear," he replied, his eyes steady and calm. Leora felt a rush of emotion she could not name. She had spent years guarding herself, rejecting every suitor because she believed no male could be trusted. Yet here was a human who did not try to impress her, who did not seek reward or status, who simply acted with courage and logic. She realized that her assumptions about males, about power, and about trust were being challenged by someone from a species she barely understood. She extended her hand, not as a princess demanding loyalty, but as someone genuinely offering help. Ethan took it, standing, though still tired. For the first time, Leora felt the walls around her heart beginning to crumble. She did not know where this path would lead, but she knew one thing. She had never met anyone like him before. That night, as the palace slept under the sparkling skies of Valoria, Leora sat by her window looking at the stars. She thought about Ethan, about his calm courage, and about the strange feeling of wanting to know more, to understand him, to see the world through his eyes. She had rejected every male before, yet here was someone who had earned her attention, not by flattery or power, but by simply being himself and acting with integrity. And somewhere deep in her heart, she knew that the next steps would be unlike anything she had faced before. She did not yet realize that a human, quiet and unassuming, had already begun to change her world forever. The palace was quiet the morning after the energy core incident, but the air was thick with tension. Princess Leora moved slowly through the corridors, her mind replaying the events of the previous day. For the first time in her life, she felt a strange mix of admiration and uncertainty about a male, a human named Ethan, who had risked his life to save her city without asking for reward or recognition. The idea that someone could act purely out of courage and reason, rather than desire for status or approval, unsettled her, yet also fascinated her. Ethan, meanwhile, had taken a simple room in the palace, arranging his tools neatly on a table. He spent the morning inspecting small machinery that regulated the palace's minor systems, quietly adjusting valves and wires. To anyone else this might have seemed mundane, but to Leora it was remarkable. Here was a human, unafraid of the complex Valorian technology, calm in the face of danger and meticulous in his work. She had watched many engineers over the years, yet none handled delicate systems with such patience and skill. Her curiosity grew with every observation. She realized she had never really seen a human act without ambition or ego. All those who had come before sought to impress her, to dominate her, or to make a name for themselves. Ethan did none of these things. He simply did what needed to be done. Unable to resist, Leora approached him as he adjusted a valve that controlled the water filtration system. "You did not have to risk yourself yesterday," she said softly. Her voice lacked its usual authority, carrying instead the weight of genuine concern. Ethan looked up, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "I did it because it was necessary," he replied. "The lives of the people, your city, they are more important than pride or fear." Leora nodded slowly, though she did not fully understand why his words affected her so deeply. She had always valued courage and intelligence, but she had never encountered someone who combined both with such humility. For the first time, she felt the urge to speak openly, to ask questions she had never dared to ask any other male. "Will you teach me?" she asked after a long pause. "Teach me why you act this way, why you are not afraid." Ethan's expression softened and he gave a small, thoughtful smile. "I can, but only if you are willing to see the world differently. Not as a princess commanding respect, but as someone willing to understand and learn." Leora's eyes widened. No one had ever spoken to her this way. To be treated as a student, not a subject, was unusual, even uncomfortable, but it stirred a desire within her. She nodded, finally feeling a sense of excitement she had not known in years. Days turned into weeks as Ethan and Leora worked together. He taught her not only about machinery and technology, but about human problem-solving, reasoning under pressure, and the importance of observing before acting. Leora, who had relied on authority and strategy all her life, began to appreciate the value of patience, humility, and trust. With each lesson, she found herself letting go of her rigid expectations and seeing humans, and Ethan, in a new light. The Palace Council watched this transformation with unease. Many Valorians feared that a human could influence the princess too much. Some whispered that she was being manipulated, that her decisions might no longer serve Valoria's interests. Leora, however, ignored their murmurs. She felt a growing clarity in her own judgment, a strength that did not come from rank but from understanding. One evening, an unexpected event tested everything Leora had learned. A rogue asteroid cluster was detected on a collision course with Valoria's outer defense stations. The alarm blared across the city and the council erupted in panic. Valorian engineers were overwhelmed by the scale of the threat, and even seasoned military leaders struggled to coordinate a response. Leora stood silently in the command chamber, her mind racing. She looked at Ethan, who was calmly analyzing data on a small portable console. "We can stop it," he said simply. "We need to act quickly, but it can be done if we prioritize the critical stations first." The council hesitated. "A human? You expect us to follow a human's plan?" one of the generals demanded. Leora stepped forward, her voice steady. "I do. He has shown me what is possible when one acts with reason and courage. We will trust him." Her words shocked everyone in the room. Never before had the princess publicly defied Valorian tradition in this way. But she did not falter. She had seen the results of Ethan's actions, and she believed in his method. Under Ethan's guidance, the defense stations were evacuated and fortified. Automated weapons were recalibrated, energy shields reinforced, and precise calculations made to redirect the asteroid's trajectory. The operation required precision, quick thinking, and absolute trust in the plan, qualities the Valorians had rarely exhibited. Yet under Leora's command, inspired by Ethan's reasoning, they followed the instructions with care and efficiency. Hours passed. The asteroid cluster approached, and the tension in the command chamber was palpable. Every heart raced, every mind focused. Leora found herself gripping the edge of the console, not out of fear of the council, but from a deep worry for the human who had become her guide. Finally, the last asteroid passed without incident, the defense systems holding perfectly. The city was safe. The council erupted in relief and amazement. Leora turned to Ethan, her eyes shining. You were right," she said, almost breathless. "We would have failed without you." Ethan shook his head, smiling faintly. "We succeeded because you trusted the plan and guided your people. I only provided the reasoning. You acted with courage." For the first time, Leora felt the full weight of gratitude, and for the first time she pleaded openly, without hesitation or pride. "Teach me more," she said, her voice sincere. "Not as a princess commanding obedience, but as someone willing to learn. Teach me how to see the world as you do. Please." The word "please" was unusual for Leora, but it carried genuine emotion. Ethan, understanding the depth of the request, nodded. "I will, and I am honored that you ask." From that day onward, the princess began a new chapter in her life. She no longer dismissed humans or other species outright. She realized that strength was not only in power or authority, but in wisdom, courage, and trust. And as she learned from Ethan, she discovered that it was possible to lead with humility while inspiring respect. A lesson that had eluded her for years. The alliance between humans and Valorians grew stronger, guided by mutual understanding rather than fear or dominance. Leora became a leader who valued insight over appearances, and Ethan became not only her teacher, but her trusted partner in building a future that no one had imagined possible. Months passed, and the bond between the princess and the human deepened. While the galaxy expected diplomacy to be led by politics and power, it was a human's quiet courage and unwavering logic that began shaping the destiny of Valoria. Leora no longer feared being vulnerable, and for the first time, she allowed someone to guide her, to influence her choices, and to earn her respect without force or arrogance. In a grand council meeting months later, Leora stood before her people, addressing the Valorian leaders and representatives from other planets. "Strength is not in those who demand obedience or loyalty," she said, her voice clear and confident, "but in those who earn it, who act with wisdom, courage, and integrity." She looked at Ethan, standing quietly at her side, and smiled. "And I have learned that lesson from one who came without expectation, one who acted not for glory, but for the good of all." From this day forward, Valoria will lead with understanding, not fear. The council murmured, some shocked, others inspired, but Leora's gaze remained steady, and she knew she had chosen correctly. She had learned, grown, and in a way been taught humility by a species she had once dismissed. The human had made her plead, not for love, not for affection, but for guidance, trust, and partnership. And in doing so, he had changed her world forever. And in the quiet moments afterward, when the council dispersed and the city rested under its sparkling skies, Leora stood by the window once more, looking at the stars. She thought of the human who had come quietly, without fanfare, and yet had become the single most important presence in her life. For the first time, she felt a calm certainty that she could face any challenge ahead, because she had learned that strength came not only from herself, but from those willing to act with courage and integrity alongside her. The galaxy, it seemed, had underestimated humans, and Valoria, guided by both princess and human, was about to prove just how extraordinary one could be when courage, intellect, and humility combined.